What is up, everybody? Rajay back I can't believe it's on a Thursday night. It's been a long time since I've been on a Thursday night, but here I am again, and I'm not alone. I'm actually going to bring in my friend Dave Thibodeau here from Ska Brewing. We're going to talk about their brewery tonight, so hopefully you all enjoy. As always, make sure to put your comments out there so you can ask questions. We can get your view on things, and you can be a part of the conversation as well. But that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring Dave in. And David, it's great to see you, my friend. Thank you for being a guest here tonight. And now being a part of Rajay BeerVentures. So great to have you on board, and looking forward to discuss your brewery there.
Yeah, me as well. Thanks for having me, Rod. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. So Ska Brewing out of Durango, Colorado. Was not familiar with Durango, and I saw you're like southwest of Denver, because Colorado, everything is overshadowed as Denver for the most part, right? So established May 30th, 1995. So 30 years, say that out loud again, 30 years in the game of craft brewing, which is like 100 years in other industries, right? so I mean, you're almost back to that OG type level as far as the length of time just coming over pretty much the next decade. And I remember 95 wasn't the easiest time to even get started still in craft brewing. I remember some microbreweries at the time that couldn't make it. They were kind of hit with headwinds. They kind of had to shut down, but you came out the gates and you're still here. And how'd you get all into it? What got you rolling into this? I mean, what made you say, I want to go ahead and start doing beer?
Yeah, it's crazy when you say that. All of a sudden I start thinking about, you're right. It wasn't so easy, and it wasn't called craft brewing. It was called micro.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't really have the internet even, it was starting to exist, but you couldn't just Google, how do I start a brewery?
Yeah.
Now.
There was no YouTube tutorial for that back then.
No. It's kind of, wow. Yeah. When we just celebrated our 30th anniversary. We always have a big anniversary party here. It's kind of our showcase event every summer. And we just had that in September. So yeah, it really hit home that we've been around that long, and I didn't realize I was that old.
Well, congrats to you on that 30 years as well. And I know, and we'll get into taking a look here at the website, but I know it was you, and I'm trying to think of the other person's name that started as I was going to pull up.
My buddy Bill. So myself and Bill Graham, we grew up together. And then later in our first year, we took on a third partner, Matt Vincent. So, the three of us all this time, pretty crazy.
Yeah. So was it something where you had a craving that you wanted to get into doing the brewing? Was it something you just kind of read The Joy of Home Brewing, or you had one of the other craft beers somewhere and it was kind of like, I could do this?
You're pretty much on it. We, so high school, mid 80s, we weren't bad students, but we partied, and it was, anything that was beer. And by beer, I grew up in Denver, so right outside of Golden, where Coors is. So in the shadow of Coors. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my friends' parents worked at Coors. Coors was just part of kind of the neighborhood, and same with Bill. And so we kind of got into drinking a lot of Coors when we were too young to be buying it, getting our hands on it one way or another. And then one day we were actually in my living room, and my dad had a bunch of bookshelves in the living room, and there was a little 3-ring binder, and on the spine it said beer book. And just the fact that it said beer, I had to pull it out and look at it. And I was with Bill, and we started flipping through it, and it was my dad's homebrew log sheets. They started in 1969. Carter made homebrewing legal in 1977.
Right. So
my dad was, I don't know, he was kind of an outlaw, I guess.
I'm an outlaw.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I was like, holy crap, look at my dad's like making his own beer. And the last log sheet, the first one was 1969. The last log sheet was 1980. So this was probably 1985. Okay. And so he probably stopped home brewing right before I would have realized that that was something he was doing, you know? And, but we started flipping through there and we're like, God, he was making his own beer. That's crazy. Nobody makes their own beer. How do you even do that?
Yeah.
And we realized that, like, I was trying to figure out where he added the alcohol. And, you know, we realized that he was actually making the alcohol, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You could buy all the stuff he was using at the time at the grocery store. You could buy malt extract in the baking section of the local grocery store. And so that was just a light bulb. The fact that we realized you could make alcohol, and we didn't care what anything tasted like. We didn't know craft beer at all. So we just, we realized that you can make alcohol. And so we went and just talked to my dad, and he got excited, and we all just jumped back into homebrewing when I was in high school. So that's how we got started, and we never stopped. We just kept going.
Now, did he actually kind of serve as your mentor, like helping you guys out when you were starting at the beginning, or he kind of let you guys kind of find your own way? How was it?
He did when we were first homebrewing. He had a buddy who lived up in Wyoming, couple hour drive from Denver. And we drove up there, and his buddy actually had a typed up price list that my dad had, and he sold homebrewing supplies out of his basement. There wasn't yet a homebrewing store in Denver or Colorado at all. One did actually open up later that year, but nothing was open yet. And so he sold all that stuff out of his basement. So we drove up there and bought all the ingredients and some equipment and came back, and my dad started brewing with us. So those first early batches, pretty much through the rest of high school and through college, I was a communications major, and every project I did, whether it was a video or a speech or a technical writing paper, everything was on brewing beer. And it was super novel at the time. Everybody was always blown away that I knew how to brew beer. And then I would bring the beer to class, which everyone thought was really taboo. So it was always shocking. You know, there's a shock. Go up at school with beer.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my dad, all those, until we were out of college, actually, he homebrewed with us quite a bit. And then once we actually made the jump to opening our own brewery, then we were force fed learning to brew beer from, I would say our mentors were some of the people that were in the industry kind of early on, like at the Wincoop Brewing in Denver. And those guys were good friends of ours. And so we had to learn a lot fast once we decided to take the step and open up our own brewery.
Yeah.
So kind of where my dad would help out when he would come to Durango, but we went past home brewing pretty fast once we got to that point.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then now I just want to get back to home brewing. It's been, we homebrewed for a lot of years when we first opened up, but I'll be honest, it's been a while for me.
Right. Well, on the business side, I know you and Bill, but then also, did you guys just bring in like the Ariano or the Westfound, or like there's something that happened earlier this year where it's kind of like, was that to bring in more capital for the brewery, or?
I'm glad you asked that, because it's always something that needs some clarification. But we actually sold the brewery this summer.
Okay.
2 local Durango guys, Bob Ariano and Dave West, and they, for a few reasons, obviously we needed more resources. We kind of, without getting too deep into it, we also owned a distillery that we sold this summer that we started in 2005. And back right before COVID hit, we spent a year in Boulder building out a brew distillery. So we were combining the brewery and the distillery and a big restaurant. And our grand opening was the March 16th of 2020. And we turned on the TV at 5:00 when we started. And the governor came on and shut all the bars and restaurants down. Our whole grand opening was an hour and 11 minutes long. And and that was pretty painful for us. And so I'd say we got a little gun shy about our next big move.
Yeah.
And we're afraid to borrow more money because we lost some money there. Not much. We ended up kind of having an arrangement that saved us quite a bit, but we were scared to do the next big thing. Meanwhile, Dave and Bob people we've known for years. In fact, Bob's family owns the distributorship in town that sells Coors, and they've owned it since Prohibition. So multi-generational family-owned business here in Durango, very familiar in the beer space. And he's always wanted our distribution. We've always had our own distribution company. So not only self-distributing, but selling other people's beers. And he always wanted it. So there was a nice synergy there for him. For us, it gave us an opportunity to get out of some debt and more resources to do some of the things that can keep us a sustainable business moving forward. So we've talked to them over the years about some kind of partnership or what could we do together. We've all known each other. And this summer, this was 2 years in the making, actually buying the brewery and changing the distribution, and it's all gone really well. So the honest truth now is that Matt and Bill, once we kind of wrap up all the details, they're no longer with Ska. I'm here indefinitely, hopefully,
Yeah. Okay.
Here basically in the same capacity that I was. We do have a new CEO, and Steve Breesley. He spent a lot of years at Avery Brewing, built their big new brewery right as they were purchased by Mao San Miguel.
Yeah.
And that's when he kind of parted ways with Avery and ended up coming here. And he's been a great asset, wonderful person. So he moved into the CEO role. So I just call myself co-founder, but
you still got the
no matter what happens, right?
You still got the president title on you, I know, but
exactly.
It's kind of like
exactly. So it was fun. We just had a board meeting with those guys last night, and then Bob's son Mario's helps out too. And they're really great guys. They're well known around Durango. They do a lot for the community, and it was a nice way to kind of preserve our own legacy. And continue to move forward without skipping a beat and keep helping, the community right when we were kind of, moving to that next stage of our lives. There's been a few health scares, and I need to focus on my family and my health a little bit and not just freak out about work all the time and actually get back to really enjoying beer, because it is what I enjoy. It's my thing without a doubt. And so it's enabled us to do that, and really has helped me. And now it's exciting and fun again. Like, not that it wasn't ever fun, but it's tough times, and it.
Yeah.
That gets scary. So
you hit on that point there with like kind of the stress thing. I'm kind of running because we don't really talk about it as much, but for a lot of people that watch, they go to the breweries. Sometimes they think, hey, cool, doing beer, kind of cool life, blah blah blah. It's like there's a lot of stress involved. There's a lot of pressure that takes place. You put a batch out there. It's the pressure. Is this batch going to sell? Can we, move this? And attitudes shifted in the market. Something you thought was going to be a grand slam now isn't happening. And then something you thought wasn't going to be as big, everybody's asking for. So it's a lot of things that take place, and the stress can definitely mount up on stuff too. Not to mention, one of the stories more recently that I shared was about how Lagunitas pulled one of their beers off the market this year because it was a bad turnout for the infection and the thing. And then sometimes you make those kind of calls. So you put all this work into this beer, and if something happens, because we know how clean it has to be, you can have a whole batch ruined. And then it's just like, now what do we do? Now we got to pour this. Now we're looking at the dollars going down the drain with the beer. So it can definitely weigh on you for sure. So
I mean, that's just to touch on that real quick. That is one of the bonuses with the popularity and the proliferation of new breweries, over the last 15 years or whatever. We saw a pretty steep trajectory of growth, and especially of breweries opening, whether they grew or failed or stuck around or not. But what came along with that was raising the bar on the quality side. You can't open a new brewery now without good beer.
Right.
People know what good beer tastes like. We were fortunate in 1995 that nobody did.
Well, now it's the good beer and having that story that people want to come out and try your beer stuff too. So that's one of the things often talked about is you can still make good beer, because we see it with a lot of the legacy beers that still make good beer, but their story may have become more stale over time, where now it's not that destination brewery for the newer crowds of people that are coming out. which also, if we go to your website, was actually what I like about what I saw on there was just some of the eye-catching type stuff. So we'll talk about that here in a second. But talking about beer, I have not cracked open a beer yet. So I want to crack open a beer. I think I'm going to go with what was your favorite we talked about. And you actually have it there already in the glass, right?
I do.
Because I didn't really take in my vegetables today. So we're going to go ahead and we can talk about this one here. But for those of you watching or those of you listening back on the podcast, Bill was gracious enough. So he sent some beers out. So ended up getting the hazy IPA, the Mexican lager, which is a pretty cool story behind that as well, and the pink vapor stew. So the one I'm going to crack open is the pink vapor stew. And this is a sour, but not like a lot of the sours you think about maybe, but it's done with beets, carrots, ginger, and apples. And it comes from his favorite smoothie dessert in the morning, from as the legend goes. So it's interesting for sure. 5% ABV. Here is a look at the can, and Bill has actually poured this one into his glass. And so this will be an interesting one to take. Now I've had beet in beer before because I think it was Ballast Point that did beet for one of their red beers they had done previously. Don't know if I've had carrot in a beer before, so that could be interesting. Apple, I usually associate with cider, and I've had ginger in beer. So, yeah, but let's put the stew in the glass and see what we got here.
Yeah, you'll see it pours pretty bright pink.
Yeah, it's got a bright pink to it.
Pink, even the head is light pink.
Get that up there.
Yeah, and it's pretty sour.
Yeah, it's got like a strawberry kind of pink.
Yeah,
on the color, a little bit of a blush type feel. Get that like right there.
Kind of hard to tell.
Yeah. A little bit of that sour nose it's faint, so it's not like a hard tartness coming at you, but you can pick up some of it. As I sit here, starting to get a little bit of the carrot coming through, I believe.
Yeah, it's funny. You get, the beet really kind of comes through more as, if you, I don't know, I'm pretty familiar with beets. I grow them at home and I make a juice out of them, like you mentioned. And they're, if you have beets with peels and you make the juice with the peels, you get a flavor that's dirty. It does seem earthy and dirty. Mm-hmm. And you definitely get that out of this beer. I mean, if you're thinking about root vegetables, they're there. Everything on its own is relatively subtle. The ginger's subtle. You have to think about it, and then you notice it. And the beet, it's really, you get more of the color from the beet than you get the true beet flavor, but you do get the earthiness that comes with, a root vegetable like that. Mm-hmm. Now if you peel a beet, it doesn't have the same flavor. Like if you roast them and they're peeled, but if you have the peel, you definitely get the earthy flavor. It's an interesting beer, and it's fairly sour, so it's kind of
it's sour, but it's not tart.
No, and it's not harsh.
It's not very acidic at all. Not really much of the astringency that you get on some of them. It's the apple comes through nicely in the taste. Almost gives like a little bit of a cider undercoat to it. A little bit of a ginger. I'm a fan of like the ginger. I like that little snap of that kind of ginger spice in there. So you get a little bit of that.
Yeah, I would, if it were just me drinking it, I would bump the ginger up quite a bit. Mm-hmm. But, across the board here at the brewery, everybody likes the beer. And we've had it out for quite a few years now. And the name sometimes sounds kind of gross, but it's a lyric from a ska funk punk band called Fishbone.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's called the song is Party at Ground Zero, and it's about a nuclear holocaust, and pink vapor stew is what the world turns into. And so that's where the name comes from. And they were actually, Fishbone was playing our anniversary party that year. So we named it Pink Vapor Stew because it's got all the root vegetables in it. It's obviously pink, and Fishbone was at the party. So the name fits, even though it sounds kind of ridiculous.
Well, it's got a pleasant mouthfeel to it overall. I mean, I'm not having any trouble putting it down.
No, it's easy to drink. And people are always shocked. It's when someone orders one at the bar, like in our tasting room, for example, it's really pretty beer, especially, if you've got a nice, like that nice pink head on it, and people always think it's raspberry or something when they see it handed across the bar. And then as soon as the bartender tells them, it's actually made out of beets and carrots. It's amazing how often people want to try it, and people always have a second, which is a great thing when you've got, a sour beer made out of beets and carrots.
Yeah.
People can not only drink it, but they always want a second. It goes down relatively smooth.
Yeah, it's going down real easy over here. And it's got a little bit of a refreshing splash on the back end as well. I mean, I do sours, and definitely, like, I have a few friends that can only do a certain type of sour, and I can see where they could actually enjoy this one, because the over tartness is what kills them a lot of the time. And this one is very pleasing to those that kind of want that sour bite, but not that over tart hit, or they don't want it to be like that candy type thing. I mean, it's just got a nice overall feel to it. And for those of you also watching, I have another one of these, so I'll be doing a review on that for the channel as well. But pretty pleasant or pretty surprising. So I'm going to put myself in the surprising category, because it was interesting when I came across that. I was like, that's going to be an interesting mix. And that's the world of craft beer. That's why it's always fun to experiment, because you're always getting surprised on stuff, right? And like Vanessa said, liquid veggie soup, yum. So I'm going to see if my doctor can count this as my veggies. If I take one of these a day, does that count as on my vegetable?
Yeah, that's what it says on the back of the t-shirt. Drink your veggies.
And she had also mentioned she's one of our former veteran, not former, still a veteran, but she was out of Lowry Air Force Base in '87, part of the search teams for the black-footed ferret. So,
wow.
Yeah. She's done a lot of time in military, so she was Air Force out there. And Vanessa's one of our superstar fans and friends, and just amazing. I tell people when they come on here, they hear it enough, but she's always been designated, like, if the apocalypse ever hit, that we go to her place in Connecticut, and she's already, like, been honored as being a leader. So it's just like, just make it there, and then she'll have a plan for what everybody needs to do. Yeah. But and for those of you tuning in here, or if you're again hearing it back on the podcast here, if you're watching it or on the replay, there at the top of the comments, I do have the website pinned, so you can check out the Ska website. But I'm going to pull it up here as well, because I like the look of it. I like the eye popping of it. And one of the things I mentioned, like, when you have like these things nowadays, your brewery has to have that almost destination factor to it. Like, you have to get people to figure out why they should come out to your brewery. And just the whole coolness of the ska kind of pulls you in. But when you go to the website and you see all the artwork and everything that was kind of done on the site, it's just like, it's phenomenal. The time and the effort and everything put in. And, I think of ska, I always think of, to me, probably one of the biggest bands, but you mentioned Fishbone, which was big too, but it's like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. So I used to be a DJ in the 90s and just remember playing them on our radio station. We were an alternative station, so we'd have shows where you'd have like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones or Fishbone or so many other bands. And it's just cool how you pulled this all together. Like, what is this ska appeal to you or to the brewery, or how did you come up with this idea to kind of put them both together along those lines?
It's funny, because it was just real, probably naivete that allowed that to happen. When we opened the brewery, okay, so when we were first doing the homebrewing with my dad, we had two criteria. You had to listen to ska music while you brewed, and you had to drink your previous batch of homebrew while you brewed. And if you didn't do those two things, there was no way you were going to make a good batch of beer. And so that was kind of, and we used to make our own labels on those first Macintosh Apple computers, and we would just write Ska Brewing on them for lack of any forethought or thought whatsoever, really.
Mm-hmm.
Dave's Kitchen, Denver, Ska Brewing Company. And then so the ska just became part of our home brewing, process. And we were really into ska, we were really into punk rock, and then we were really into comic books and craft beer. And so we just did the things we were into when we opened the brewery. We didn't open a very big brewery, and we didn't spend a lot of money on equipment or anything. In fact, we actually started the brewery with $47,000 that we ended up borrowing from Bill's dad. We did go to the bank. They pretty much laughed us out of the when we showed them our comic book business plan.
Right.
They just laughed us right out of the bank, and they weren't going to lend us any money. And so we learned a lot. And, and we actually did write this comic book, which kind of is the whole tale and the characters, and it's where a lot of the marketing and the character of the whole brewery really comes from, was the origin story, which is a completely embellished, goofy story, but we actually have the printed comic book. And those were just the things we were into at the time. And, I remember people telling us once we actually started to grow that we probably shot ourselves in the foot by naming it something nobody knew. A lot of people aren't familiar with ska music.
Right.
And then, it was kind of in the comic book, we were just doing what we liked. We didn't know any better. And to be honest with you, I didn't think we'd still be here 30 years later. I didn't know about 3 months later. And so, but in retrospect, it kind of, I think it worked in our favor, because there's a degree of authenticity there that you can't replicate, and it just is who we are. And so I think the soul of the brewery, is real, and I think the consumer can relate to that and maybe want to be a part of it, because it's just actually who the people are. And so I think looking back, it probably worked to our favor, instead of naming it whatever Mountain, Peak, or River Brewing Company, or whatever.
Right.
That's what everybody was named after at the time. So it's kind of I felt like there were times I certainly questioned why we called it Ska Brewing, but at the end of the day, I'm so glad that we did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has that appeal to make it stand out. Now, had I not, for myself speaking, been a radio DJ in the 90s, and I might have been like with ska too or whatever. But like when I saw that, it just started bringing back memories of different ska bands from back in the day. And because the 90s was probably the big run for a lot of the ska music when you think about it. So we were seeing a lot of the different band stuff pop up and catching fire, just like it was big for the grunge type thing during that time. You still had them lingering afterwards, but that was really like the moment where a lot of that stuff was really taking place, late 80s, 90s, into that type of area, right? So it brought back good memories just thinking about that and everything. But then when I saw it, and I'm thinking inside the brewery, it's probably got that same type of things there on the walls, kind of relates back. It tells that story and stuff. So in a way, it helps to keep that piece of that genre of music even alive, with you being kind of connected to it, right? And then it's like you got the beer there. So you're always, people come in, they're new, they're kind of like learning something new, and they have that story. So it's kind of like go over to Ska Brewing and you're picking up not just some good beers, but also some of the education from just seeing the different things around the music. And I love the comic stuff with it as well. I mean, it just all matches. It all matches and works together. So
it's so weird because it doesn't seem like it should, but yeah, it does. I mean, it's interesting because there's a lot of people that come in, they don't know what ska is. It's just it's the biggest brewery in the area, and so they're coming by to check on it. They heard the beer was good or the food is good, or maybe it's for sale in their own market. They don't know what ska music is, which is it's pretty common. Granted, I take it for granted because it's my world, but at the same time, you'll get people that'll show up here that traveled across the entire country almost on a pilgrimage because they're so into ska music and they know about us. And when they get here, it's like it's their little mecca, and it's I love when that happens, by the way.
Yeah.
And you can see them, who it is when you're down in the tasting room. I mean, it's obvious who knows about us because they're a ska fan. And right, when we opened, that was the third wave of ska. That was the 90s was when that was really happening.
Yeah. And And with the now, one thing I noticed with the brewery, because you guys have really a decent amount of beer selection, although you're definitely more tilted to the IPA type thing. So the
For
IPA
sure.
deal, right? So coming across, and I think is it the Hoppers Randi? Hoppers Randi, that's kind of your big IPA that a lot of people really like. That like your big flagship,
Right. Modus Hoperandi.
Modus Hoperandi, yeah.
Yeah.
But nothing that I saw in there, like you don't do anything like with the dark ales as far as like porters or stouts, or do you kind of mess with them on a seasonal thing here and there? But I know there was nothing listed currently there when I looked.
Yeah, much to my chagrin. I'm a dark beer guy. I mean, I am definitely a hop guy. I love IPAs.
Yeah.
And I mean, but when I go to another brewery, the first thing I'm looking for is a dark beer. And we've had regular dark beers in our rotation. Steel Toe Stout was a milk stout we had for years. Pretty decorated. We won a lot of Great American Beer Fest medals with that beer. And yeah, I loved it. But it just didn't, as you keep expanding, you can kind of get yourself into a bit of a bind, as the brew house gets bigger, your fermenters get bigger. You and I touched on it before we started a little bit, but you get to a point where you need a certain rate of sale with the beers that you're actually going to distribute outside your backyard.
Right.
You need to be able to brew them often enough to, keep the yeast healthy and alive. Make sure you don't run out before the best buy date, or, you're brewing another one before that happens. And so Steel Toe Stout, which before we expanded the size of our brew house, that was one of our flagships. We made it all the time. We had a brown ale that we made, Buster Nut Brown Ale. And then we also had a porter, 10-pin porter. And those were three of the beers that we basically started with that we had for years and years. And then we kind of outgrew the rate of sale on those beers, which is horrible to have happen when you're in love with a beer like that.
Right.
And anymore, people, they're so, it's not as painful as it used to be, because so many breweries, I mean, there's a lot of breweries that don't even brew the same beer twice anymore. Especially if you're just a taproom brewery, right? And so we did do a limited run of cans of Steel Toe Stout earlier at the end of this past winter.
Okay.
It flew off the shelves because everybody was familiar with it from years ago. And it was delicious. And now that we're getting back into winter, we'll have a stout and a porter probably on through most of the winter, but probably really only in our tasting room. And there was 2 years there where we didn't have a dark beer on during the winter months. And Colorado is so seasonal. I didn't realize that it was really the thing it was, but I always like darker beers when it gets colder, and I like lighter beers when it's hot. And I knew that a lot of people were like that. Well, it becomes painfully obvious if you don't have a stout on in the winter. People get pissed. So, yeah, we will have dark beers on through, at least here in the tasting room, throughout the winter, because I'm not going through that anymore. Plus, it's what I want to drink,
Yeah. No, it's smart. I know some breweries, they'll do like the little pilot batches and stuff, so the smaller ones, because you do have to make the beer to scale. So it makes sense to actually have that. But it was interesting. I was going through, I was like, well, that's interesting. But then, I know some breweries. I know one of the breweries I used to go to in Baltimore, they were basically modeled after more English type style beers, but they didn't have an American IPA. So you had an English IPA, and then you had all this other, you had a Belgian, and you had a porter and all that stuff. But for them, it was successful what they were doing. But then they ended up buying a brewery out of Jersey that was kind of that IPA type thing. So now they just sell them out of their cans and have them handle that part. So it's, it's finding that mix that actually works and stuff. So I can definitely see where that was rotated. That was just one of those things. I know, like the porter and the stout. I know Colorado, when it gets in the winter, I can see where people definitely want to enjoy those. So I just like, it's kind of interesting there.
Yeah. It's a thing. People honestly do like darker beers when it's colder out.
Yeah. How many
I have a couple really good friends that live in Denver that I that's kind of what we do. I go up there all the time. You mentioned how everything's not really in the backyard of Denver. We're a 6.5 hour drive, from
Yeah, yeah. You look on the map and
you
you're
know,
southwest of it. It's like, how far is that really driving? And it's like,
that's
yeah,
it.
Colorado.
Yeah, it's a ways. But
Yeah.
my family is up there, and my wife's family is up there, and so we're up there all the time. My daughter goes to CU in Boulder. And,
Okay.
yeah, and so it's kind of when I get up there, there's a couple breweries that are must hits every time we go, that I really like to go to. But one of my buddies, he just likes dark beer, period. And it's,
Mhm.
if you're with him and somebody doesn't have a dark beer on, it's frustrating. I don't want to be that guy now that I'm really aware of it.
I can
I
definitely,
wish
yeah.
I wish we had one. I wish we had a stout or a porter. And porter's interesting. People always love it, but it doesn't sell.
Yeah.
Porter is not a style that people will buy a 6-pack of every night, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bummer because it's, so we can mess around with it. Basically, if you want to try some of the beers that we've had in the past or some of the styles that you don't see maybe in your market or whatever, we do a lot of those on a small scale just here for our tasting room. And that's where you'll find our darker beers and more kind of wacky styles of beer. So it's but IPAs are what we really hang our hat on,
Yeah.
as far as distribution goes. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, you mentioned that with the porter, and I kind of see the same thing with kind of like brown ales. And I know a lot of brewers that love making brown ales, but they can't get enough of them sold, so they can't put them out there and stuff. That's why it's always surprising when you find a brewery that has a really good brown ale like out in the market, because some breweries just won't even touch it because it's just too much of a risk for them.
Yeah, there's not many. I mean, one of the ones you used to always see around Durango was from Big Sky up in Montana, Moose Drool.
Yeah, Moose Drool I know about. Yeah.
And it's a great beer. And I always thought like our brown ale, Buster Nut Brown, was a really good beer. And I think Moose Drool is still a big thing for Big Sky. But we stopped brewing Buster Nut. And
I love that name. That name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We started, so we haven't, we did brew, for our 30th anniversary, this was kind of fun. We released a new beer. We've been releasing a new beer every Friday, but on the first Friday of each month throughout this whole year to celebrate our 30th anniversaries, we would do what we called Forgotten Flagships. So the first Friday of each month, we would bring back one of our old beers that we used to really lean on heavily. So the porter and the Buster Nut Brown Ale and Steel Toe Stout, and a lot of the beers that we just generally don't make on a regular basis anymore, we would release once a month throughout the whole year. So it was a lot of fun, and people were, it was great. We'd have a crowd in here, for First Fridays, looking to try some of the beers that they just miss.
Yeah. That's a pretty cool way to keep it out there in front of the folks too. Yeah, and how many taps do you run there at the brewery? You got a good amount.
Yeah, we have 20 in the main tasting room, and then we've got 6 more. We have an upstairs part of our tasting room as well.
Okay.
And, so we've got, but 20 all the time. And it's all beers. Occasionally we might put one of our seltzers on, but generally it's pretty much all ska beers.
Okay.
So there's always a couple pretty interesting ones that are one-offs, that are brewed just for the tasting room. We have a little pilot system that we call the Mod Brewery. That's like, it's a 7-barrel system. So we can do 7 barrels at a time while we're kind of doing some R&D, and we let a lot of the staff mess around with various styles that they might be interested in. And we have a competition. We do like a beer bracket for March Madness. Everybody, the idea that they get a brew, with the brewers, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun, and people love it in the tasting room. There's always something new and exciting down there. So,
gotcha. Well, one thing I was going to ask you about too, because I've had a couple of videos recently you've been talking about on the channel, and I was going to say it was a rather controversial topic, but then I was on your website. I'm like, oh, they actually addressed this in there on the website. Children in breweries.
Why do you got to bring that up?
Just curious, like how has that been received there? Because the one thing I like, just funny, the unsupervised children would be dipped in bronze and sold off a sculpture, but you do put that out there for parents to know where your children are at all times. how often do you see a lot of things happening with children in brewery? I would say like 95% of the time, the children, if they are in there, they're usually fine with the parents. But occasionally you do have to running around and you do have to worry about the liability concerns. And just kind of curious from your perspective, what you actually are seeing there on your end.
Yeah, and I have an answer for that. When we built this place, in the particular building we're in now that we call the world headquarters, that was in 2008. And so that was right when both myself and my partners were first having kids. And we knew at that, like, our kids were hanging out here, when they were little kids and running around. And there's certainly a liability factor. Our beer garden, it's pretty big, and we have 2 acres of land that we own right next to us. And there's trees and stuff out there. And you get out there and you find that the kids have been building forts out of our furniture. And, it's just ridiculous. But at the same time, we knew right then that family for us is the most important thing there is. And that, if people want to be around their families and they want to be around kids, that's, to us, it goes all the way to it's what's going to save us at the end of the day is this next generation. And we just embraced it wholeheartedly. Our families, our kids were always welcome here. And so that's been the culture here. And there's street signs out in the parking lot that says slow down for kids, dogs, and craft beer drinkers, and it's been, since we opened, long before a lot of breweries that are bitching and complaining about whether it's good or bad to have kids. It's always been part of the culture here. Right. And, everybody's fairly respectful about it. But I think in a place like Durango, where you have a fairly tight-knit community, a lot of the people are kindred spirits. And if you don't, I get it. I understand. Our place isn't just a bar. It's an experience. You're welcome to do whatever you want here. We got multiple stories here. You can run around next door in the field. You can bring your dog, whatever you feel like doing. We don't even care. And it's like, if that's not your jam, I get it. Don't come here. It's like these kids running around, and I love them. And so for me, I get it. I understand why some people, they want to go have a beer with their buddies and they don't want a bunch of kids, pulling on their pant leg or whatever it might be that they're upset about. I think dogs are usually a worse problem than kids, but
oh, really? Okay.
I'm a dog person too. So it's interesting. Like I'm all about dogs and kids, and they're welcome here, and that's just the way it's always been. And it's unapologetic. It's I don't really care. I don't care what brewery I go to if there's kids or dogs or not.
Yeah.
If kids are behaving poorly or dogs are behaving poorly, it's kind of on the parents at that time of, or the dog owner or whatever, however you want to refer to them. That's the person I'm more upset with. It's
right.
Not
sure. Yeah. Kids are just going to be kids and they're going to be inquisitive. I just did a live stream talking about it. I mean, kids are just doing what they're going to do. A kid's only going to sit still for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how it is. And the parents' responsibility is to make sure that their kids are taken care of and not expecting the wait staff or the beer tenders, whatever, to have to monitor their kids for them, not to come over, hey, like the parents need to make sure they kind of do that. Like I said, 95% of the time, I think that's the case from stuff I've seen, but occasionally you also stuff running around. I know some people in the breweries that, sometimes kids will go running around. Some places aren't as secure as others, where it's not a door, it's like just a rope to an open area, and kids will walk under it and they'll be back in the back of the brewery. So it's just different things can actually happen. But I think what you do address it is a good thing.
Yeah, and we have a lot of safety protocols here, and our production area is separate. Kids can't get in. They can play around in the beer garden. They can get through the tasting room, but they can't get into any production area, So, I mean, I think the biggest safety issue is them climbing trees, in a property or something. They're kept away from equipment and production and anything dangerous they can't get to. And so that's part of it. And I think, for the most part, it's really obvious that's. I mean, if you're coming here just completely blind, never heard of us, your friend drags you here, I could understand you being caught off guard. But I think for the most part, people know what they're getting into when they come here.
Yeah.
And the kids are like, I mean, because we have that land and we have a big beer garden outside, the kids are often in their own world building those forts in our trees and stuff. They're not running around screaming in the tasting room, banging pots and pans.
Yeah.
So,
and that's a smart way to do it, because I think there's some breweries that actually do, if they want to have that family environment, then they do put stuff there at the brewery to occupy some of the kids. Like some breweries I know I have like a kids kind of play area type outside or stuff like that and everything. So if you're going for the whole family experience, I think you have to prepare the people for that. I think where it's more is kind of like when it's just a brewery in like this, say, warehouse type setting, or just like this building, and it's not the way for the kids that they start getting bored and stuff, and then and it's like you got games. A lot of breweries will have games for adults sit there and play, play Monopoly or play Sorry or play this and that. And the kids get into it and start, and then all of a sudden you got these pieces on the floor and people are stepping on them like this. There's not stuff really there to entertain for that. So if you're going to do it, there's a way to actually do it right and stuff too. But
I get that, and it makes complete sense to me. I think a lot of, at least with the locals here, I think mom and dad know that they can come out here with some friends and let their kid go run off with their buddy's kid, and they can actually have a beer. Well, they have to be with their kid for that moment of the day for whatever reason, Yeah. And this is a place that they can comfortably come and do that with a friend and not worry too much about anything. And then, and then they take off with their kid. But this is a place you can have a beer, at the end of a rough day or whatever it might be. And you sit down like you're at a pub, you have a beer with your buddy, and then you find your kid and take off.
Right.
Yeah. It's a nice little, I mean, who doesn't like, well, obviously a lot of people probably don't, but having a beer at the end of a rough day that's a gold mine to me. That's what I can't wait for that moment sometimes,
Yeah.
And if I remember when my daughter was, 8 years old, like, what am I going to do? I either, I just want to have a beer.
Yeah.
I got my daughter, So, I don't know. Makes sense to me, but I understand that it's not for everybody.
Yeah. You got to get your
quite controversial.
It's the last few months. I can say probably every week or two, there's an article I'm coming across about the children in brewery, which kind of led to me doing a couple of the last videos, kind of talking about, discussing, and sharing some stuff out there, because I think most of the people are in that middle area. They don't really care as long as everything's fine, blah, blah, blah. But you have a fringe on the end that just doesn't want them there. And you have a fringe on the end, like, why can't all my kids be included, right? They get upset. Like, we had a brewery here in Ohio. All they did is said, we want to go to no children after 7:00. And then they were getting like people like, well, I hope your brewery survives that you won't have families, and they were getting threats and all kind of, it's like serious.
Wow.
Like, it's not that serious, folks. It's not that serious. So there's people that definitely go off on both ends of it. So it's always an interesting topic. And I was at a couple of breweries this weekend talking to a couple of the beer tenders that were there, and they were kind of like, oh yeah, kids in brewery. And like one of them was just talking about how they run around, all that kind of stuff. And the other one's like, oh, it's not really that bad. I mean, as long as the parents take care of them. So again, it's who you're talking to and what you're seeing there. And it always comes back to the parent being a parent, right? And being a responsible thing. And I think if that's done, then a lot of that's taken care of. But I did want to get into, before we wrap up here in a bit, one, do you have your favorite that you have there? Obviously, I know you do like the one here that we're talking about, but do you have is there another one, or is that the one that's kind of your favorite beer to stand out? It's like asking your favorite kid. I know that because I get asked that question all the time, but yeah. Is there one?
I was telling you, I just gave a college business class a tour right before we started the podcast.
Yeah.
And they asked me the same question.
Yeah.
I kind of touched on it earlier, with how I like dark beers when the temperatures get colder. And I love all of the beers that we make. I really do. I would say pretty equally, but any given day, one of them's going to shine above the others.
Yeah.
I do drink a lot of our Mexican lager during the summer.
Yes.
That's, if I'm maybe at the lake or just doing something recreational that we're also drinking beer, then Mexican lager. If I'm going to, just drink beer after beer after beer, which I do, I'll drink a lot of Mexican lager.
Yeah.
But I think like right now, we've had a really crazy, warm fall, and so there's still colored leaves on the trees. They haven't all fallen off just yet. And it's just now starting to get really cold at night.
Right.
And I can feel right now, like, man, I'm moving into darker beer mode. And right before we came on, I was downstairs looking over our tap selection, like, gosh, it's stout time and we don't have one on,
Yeah.
Close. I'm not going to raise a fuss yet, but it's going to happen. But there's certainly, I do have favorites. We do it's kind of a complicated story, but we have a pale ale it's only a winter seasonal that we come out with every year. And we brew it with a local snowboarding manufacturer called Euphoria. And the graphics are wintry. Other than the fact that it's with the snowboard company, it's a pale ale. It's heavy Simcoe. So it's not, there's no real reason for it to be a winter seasonal beer, other than it's a snowboard company that we brew it with. But we've been doing it for years. And it's now I'm to the point where that is my shoulder season getting into winter beer before I really got to drink black beers,
Yeah.
And, so I'm kind of in this Euphoria pale ale mode coming out of Mexican lager. Then we'll start drinking darker, maltier beers throughout the rest of the winter. But that's one of my favorites is Euphoria, and it's just pale ale. I think it's a delicious pale ale.
Sure.
Simcoe heavy pale ale, but I look forward to it every year. And then those are probably my two favorites: is our Mexican lager and our Euphoria.
Yeah.
And there's nothing crazy about either of those beers. They're just very drinkable and approachable, and I really appreciate both of them just for what they are.
Okay. And I'm actually glad you brought up that because I forgot to ask earlier. So the Mexican lager, because that's always been a kind of a weird type thing. If you look at BJCP, like the style got it really did have a style until maybe like the last year or two, and it had to be squeezed in. But you guys are making this 26 years ago.
Yeah, we started in 99. You're right.
Yes. So it's kind of like, how did you get out to even think of making that even a style? Because it wasn't existing. So how did you even come up with that?
It's so funny that you ask, because it's honestly, we were really proud of being craft brewers, but we were closet Pacifico drinkers. We didn't want anyone to see us drinking Pacifico, and we did it all the time. I remember going to big beer festivals, in those early days, and not really drinking the other micro brewed beer, and hitting our secret stash of Pacificos in the can, and in the summer, we used to it was a big deal. Like we would, at a certain time of day after we were all done with work, or we just went on a bike ride. Mountain bikes are a huge thing in Durango. You get back from a bike ride and it's like, let's go get some lagers. And we always just called them Mexican lagers. But it was Pacifico that we were mostly drinking. And then one day I was like, man, we can't just keep hiding this from everybody. Let's make our own. And so we did, and that was, we found this yeast strain from Mexico City, and one of the labs worked with us at the time. And we started making this Mexican lager in 1999, and we were bottling it back then. And it grew every year. Like every year it kept growing. And it was probably 15 years before I saw another craft brewery make a Mexican style lager.
Oh yeah.
So it was, it simply came from our roots of just being punk ass beer drinking kids before we knew what was great beer. And we just, in the summer, especially, Mexican lagers were the thing that we kind of drank behind the scenes. And it was fun too, because we didn't shy away. Once we made our own, we didn't shy away from like limes or anything. And I remember that was kind of taboo.
Yeah,
You know,
it's like fruit
lime
beer. Yeah.
So we would show up at beer festivals with our own Mexican lager with a bucket full of chopped up limes, and nobody would put a lime in it when they tried it. And it stuck, and now it's, every craft brewery's got a Mexican style lager now. Not everyone, but they're all over.
Well, it's really kind of like I said, like a few years ago, there were even articles being written about like Mexican lager is not a style, but brewers keep making it. And so finally, I think they kind of pushed their way into BJCP. Like, you need to make this a style. But
right,
I think like 26 years ago, it's kind of like, you talk about OG, like you guys, the byline says OG of the Mexican lager, but really you guys are, because I don't remember any craft brewery back that soon doing Mexican lagers. It really became something more common, I would say, probably over 2025. So probably over the last 10 years, 5 to 10 years,
right,
where you start really seeing an implosion of these Mexican lagers coming out. So kudos to you for finding, hey, this could actually be a great thing out there. And the nameplate is excellent on it with the LOGGER. That's a nice way to work it in there too. So I know Bill, like myself, has a journalism degree, so I'm sure he was helping out in the marketing on that. So we can call it LOGGER.
That was funny because that actually came from we were really big into making mixed tapes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, back in the day, yeah.
I can't remember what the name of the mixtape was, but it rhymed with lager. It was 3 words: this, and Mexican lagers, and it was just a summer theme. And it was just a mixtape I made, and it ended with Mexican lagers because all of our days had those Pacificos as part of the end of our day. And it was that mixtape when we finally decided to brew our own. We had that mixtape, and we had spelled it LOGGER. And so we just ran with that, I remember turning into the TTB. I remember trying to get the label approved.
Yeah.
And, you can't call it back then. I didn't even think about this as, it just said Mexican lager, and we turned it in. And the TTB, well, at that time it was the ATF, said you have to call it a Mexican style lager. And I'm like, well, it's a logger, though. It's like a guy who cuts down trees.
Yeah.
So, but it didn't matter. We had to change the label and actually say Mexican style lager. We couldn't just leave it Mexican lager. They wouldn't let us because it wasn't made in Mexico, actually.
Yeah. And that's what you see like with the Belgian style type things and all kind of stuff. So the good old TTB. And then one other thing too was, so you guys took a little bit of a different route, I would say, because you have a lot of the breweries now going to the NA beer, but you guys went NA with the seltzer, kind of doing it that way, because I don't think you're doing an NA beer. I don't know if that might be something down the line, but then also you guys have dabbled out there now into the CBD drinks, which a lot of people are going more to the THC type drink. Is there any difference in having to do the CBD filing versus THC filing because of the Delta, and you having CBD is more acceptable, or?
Yeah. Timely question.
Yeah.
So actually, my partner, Matt, he started another company called Ska Fabricating, building canning line equipment, which he sold a couple of years ago. When he did that, he hooked up with some of the guys that owned a dispensary here in Durango, and they started a company called Ojai, and it was a CBD seltzer and a THC seltzer, but they were too ahead of the game. So the THC, we were making their CBD seltzer for them. And the THC they had to make at the dispensary because of the law.
Right.
It was really expensive at the time. I don't think there was another drink that I knew of at the time that actually had THC in it. They were really early on it. So they decided it didn't really work. It was too expensive. You could buy a bunch of edibles for a lot less than 1 can of Ojai THC. So they kind of shut that side down. And then we actually took on the brand Ojai to just keep making the CBD, which is regulated very different from the actual THC. This is aside from Delta 9.
Right.
And so Ojai kind of became our brand, and we just pay those guys a royalty now. Because they kind of just stepped out of the beverage space. And we were just talking about Delta 9. And, early on, we were thinking, why do you need Delta 9 in Colorado? You can actually have legal THC just straight up, it doesn't have hemp derived. But then it started, once Circle K, you've probably seen recently, Circle K, Target, they're all planning on carrying Delta 9 products nationwide.
That's crazy. Yeah.
You may have seen that 35 attorney generals are pushing Congress to make all of that stuff illegal.
Yeah.
Anything that gets you high. So it seems like a dicey space to move into at the moment till we see how this plays out. But I think right now, as far as Colorado's laws go versus the federal laws, THC is regulated very similar to CBD, if not exactly the same in Colorado.
Okay.
So I think we could get away with it. But, with putting that investment, you might be putting the cart before the horse and find out the horse is not even alive.
Yeah.
So, the CBD stuff. And then the other one we have, the non-alcoholic seltzers. That's actually something we've made for years. We just started canning it a few years ago. And we call it Skagwa. And it's just sparkling water, flavored sparkling water, lightly flavored sparkling water. And that's because that actually originated because we were, when we first started the brewery, we would drink beer all day long, and we were young and dumb,
Yeah. Just seemed the thing to do. Yeah.
And then one day we were like, this is getting to be a serious business. We can't, and that's not safe. We shouldn't be doing that. Let's take this seriously. But we like a sparkling beverage in our hand.
Right.
So we started making our own sparkling water long before I ever heard of LaCroix, or whatever. And we just always had it on tap in the back room, in the production area. And then we finally said, let's start canning this. Flavored waters are a thing. And but we started that just for something for us to drink all day long,
Yeah.
And now I love it. It's my sparkling water that I keep in my refrigerator at home. And the Ojai CBD stuff is really good too. And we'll see about this next venture and if it's worth moving into Delta 9 or not.
Yeah.
Because if it's, if THC beverages not derived from hemp can only be sold in dispensaries, that's not a great outlet for volume.
Right.
But if all of a sudden it's at Circle K, if it's Delta 9, that's a different game you're talking about now.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
Colorado's interesting because we do have some weird laws right around Delta 9, even though we're so liberal with the marijuana laws, as far as, I guess, if you compare it to the rest of the nation, pretty progressive state.
Sure. Right. Yeah. That in California. But like here in Ohio, we had the Delta 8, Delta 9. And just recently, the governor tried to stop all the Delta 9. So pretty much passed an executive order and a judge paused it. And it was funny because one of the retailers near me, that one of the local beer stores, you go to they got like the THC drinks and stuff now.
Yeah.
And they just are pulling it from shelves. And and they were like, when they found out it was going to be like at noon, he was going to announce it. There was like we're opening up at 11:15, so everybody can come in and stock up on their Delta 9 before the governor shuts it down.
Wow.
And then like 2 days later, when the judge paused it, they started restocking again because now it was in effect. Now everybody's just been like stockpiling Delta 9 from a lot of these places before in case it comes back again. But it's kind of crazy. He's actually created a little bit of a gold rush of people that want to enjoy Delta 9 or to have it around. So it's interesting to see what ends up happening. But I wasn't sure in Colorado if they look at it the same way as CBD. CBD, depending on what you get against Delta 9, but CBD, I always think more of the relaxing type feel. Just at the end of the day, take a little stress off type thing. And you have some of that with some of the Delta strains as well. But, it's definitely interesting. And we do have the dispensaries here where they can actually carry stuff, but they were blocking it from other stores and some of the things like that. In Ohio, one of our breweries, Urban Artifact, they're in another joint venture with someone else that does the THC because they can't do it in Ohio law with the brewery.
Sure.
And so I didn't know in Colorado if you're able to sell the CBD at the brewery or it has to be something different but it seems like you guys can offer it there still and be okay.
Yeah. And that was a big gray area. Now you can pretty much find CBD drinks in anywhere now in Colorado.
Yeah.
And, but that was gray at first. I mean, everyone was kind of afraid and some people just started doing it. And now it's fairly normal. You know, you can get a CBD drink anywhere. Not a thing.
But now, Dave, it's been great having you on. I know we're trying to stay close to the time and everything, and we could go on more and more, but I know you probably got some stuff there to do as well. But distribution, Colorado, Arizona, Kansas, New Mexico, and Utah currently. So anywhere else you're going to be expanding to, or you kind of just keeping it in that area?
We kind of keeping it there for the time being. You know, one other market that's really good for us, oddly as it sounds, it's a long story, but we sell a lot of beer in Sweden. It's after Colorado, it's our second biggest market.
Okay.
Yeah, and that stems from winning some medals with Modus Hoperandi over there at the Stockholm Beer and Whiskey Festival. And, you know, Sweden's interesting. There's 400-ish stores in Sweden, and they're liquor stores, and they're all owned by the government. And it's literally referred to as the monopoly. It's the Systembolaget is what they call it. And they do limited releases, and then they do full-time listings. And we were really fortunate with our timing, the type of beer we had. And we got Modus Hoperandi in there years ago. And now it's it's a regular beer in Sweden. It's all over the country. And, you know, we're in all 400 of those stores. And so that's the one other market outside of the United States.
Yeah.
It's so crazy because you can't even find us in Texas or California, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for
we're kind of focused. Colorado.
Yeah.
It's, you know, the southwest corner of the state is where the Four Corners region is.
Right.
In Mesa Verde National Park. So we're right there. And you can, you know, just a few minutes from the brewery, an hour from the brewery, you can stand in Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado in one spot. And so we're that close to those other states. And, you know, that's kind of a lot of our focus, close to home. You know, it's easy. Logistics are not nearly as complicated as it can be when you try to sell beer across the country. But, you know, and every state's got their own great breweries now. So it doesn't make a lot of sense if you've got great local breweries in Ohio, even, you know, why do we need to sell our beer there? You know, it's probably not going to sell because there's enough good beer there. And, you know, everyone wants to support their local economy, and it's understandable. So we kind of we're sticking close to home. We did used to be quite a bit more broad with our distribution, but it's comfortable to be in the states that surround Colorado and kind of focus on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a smart way to do it because you do have to be careful that we know the stories of some that weren't, and then they're not around anymore because they stretch themselves too thin. So logistics does have that play, especially with more of the community sense that a lot of people are having in their breweries when they want to support that. So it's you know, it's tough. You know, people see a beer here and there, they really like to try it, but it's kind of like, unless it's something that might be that much more unique, you may not be worth it for the brewery to come into it, right? Like, you know, you have the various different types of IPAs, but if you're going to a state where they're also like heavily IPA, it's kind of like they're going to probably go more their local type thing, even though we know we have this one here or we won a Great American Beer Fest, or like that and everything. It's still a tough draw sometimes. So makes sense. Dollars and cents, actually. So yeah. But no, Dave, it was great having you on, and I'll have to get you back and get into some more things in time. Always welcome to come back on and be a guest and update us on Ska Brewing. And we got to give a shout out to M over at Radcraft for getting us together and putting this all out there. So thank you, M, along those lines. Anything you want to say in closing before we wrap up here?
No, Rod, I just appreciate you having me, and just keep doing what you're doing. We need more people like you at this point in time.
I appreciate it. Hopefully, I don't know if there's plans for next year as far as going to Philadelphia for the conference they're going to have out there for CBC. But if so, definitely let me know. Hopefully, I'll be on that one. I went to the one that we just had in Indianapolis. It was a blast. It was great to have a lot of conversations we had with the breweries and bringing it back and sharing it with folks and being able to tell those stories and get people excited about beer as much as we can. So you guys definitely have some headwinds. You're always going to have some headwinds out there, but it's still a great thing. I still greatly enjoy it, and I have fun
beer,
with
right?
it. Yeah, it's beer. It's like
years. It outlasts everything.
It outlasts everything since supposedly 5,000 BC. It might have been earlier than that, but it's the third most popular drink in the world. Behind water and tea. And I question that on tea, but that's just
that's all India.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's you're right, and it's not going anywhere.
Not going anywhere. Yeah, in fact, it just keeps getting better most of the time. Yeah. So, but thanks for everybody that tuned in, watching on the YouTube channel. Make sure to check out Ska Brewing. Check out the website. If you're in one of those states where they're at, make sure to try to check out their beers there too. As I mentioned, I'll have some reviews coming up on the one I had tonight. I have another one of those, and I also have the Mexican lager, and then also one of the IPAs. So I'll be sharing that with you. And in the podcast, you'll find information off the brewery and the notes as well. But it's been great. Thanks for everybody that tuned in, whether you did it live or you did it on the replay. And look forward to catching up with you all on the next one. Thank you again, Dave. Appreciate you being here. If you want to hang out for a second, we'll get all wrapped up and we'll be good to go.
Right on. Thanks, Rod.
Thank you. Cheers, everybody.